Raptors faithful, and welcome to the Wrap Up Live, your post-game show by the Raptors Republic community, where we are doing this after the Raptors beat the Washington Wizards 114 to 104 to improve their record to 37 and 38. Still can't get that 500 mark, but maybe next one. I'm joined by Aiden Moss, and we said we're going to start with the good stuff the Raptors did in this game, which was a blowout for 3 of the 4 quarters, and then we'll get to some of the bad that happened in the third quarter there. But just generally starting with the good, Aiden, what did you like about the Raptors' approach today? What do you think they did well to kind of earn this win?
For the most part, I think there seems to be like a general confidence with this team that maybe prior to that little win streak last week didn't exist. And it seems to be kind of ironically that self-confidence leads to confidence in others. Let that be a lesson to us all with our friendships, maybe. But like
Amen.
there's a lot of ball movement. There's a lot of like giving up the first shot to find a better shot. And we didn't see a ton of that, throughout this year. There was a lot more of like you go, I go kind of stuff. And in the first quarter, especially, I mean, it always helps when you're hitting your shots. And Freddie and OG were just lights out, and that makes everything easier. But just generally speaking, it feels like there's a lot more cohesion. And I really haven't spoken on here much since Pirtle has come, but I think like he having one less mouth to feed on that starting lineup, like you're really seeing them kind of gel and come together in the first quarter, especially. You saw that.
Yeah, the ball movement started good, was not good in that third quarter,
No,
but
it was
again,
not.
we'll get to that. For me, I think it was on the defensive end of the ball that stood out to me because especially in the first half, like they were just turning the Wizards over again and again and getting out in transition. They end the game with 13 steals. The Wizards have 18 turnovers and the Raptors have 28 fast break points. And I felt like the majority of that was done in the first half, where their length overwhelmed the size of the Wizards in this game. And I'm like sitting there on my couch and I'm like, this happened against the Pacers too. It's like it feels so silly that some of these teams are just like throwing these passes around like OG Anunoby and Pascal, and it's like, come on, like know the game plan, take care of the ball. You got to do that stuff against the Raptors. But I also imagine being on an actual court with, Fred and then 4 guys who are 6'9" and up. It would be pretty difficult to like have those passing lanes, and even when it looks like a non-risky pass, it ends up being one. So yeah, I thought they were really swarming guys on defense. Fred had that one like dig down where he hit the ball like 4 times. I think it was Denny Avdia. They swarmed Denny, and that gave Fred the ability to just like keep taking whacks at it, finally get it loose and go the other way. So I did think, their ability to swarm and their length played a big factor in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it helped that without Beal and Kuzma, you don't really have most guys or any guy. I mean, Avdia is a great playmaker. I think a little bit more in transition than in the half court. And DeLon Wright doesn't want to have the ball in his hands all that much. So, not having Beal and Kuzma, it was ripe. They were ripe for the attack, essentially. Like making guys feel uncomfortable, for making them make a pass more quickly than they otherwise would, when typically they're probably, the receiver of those first passes. So, I think we exploited that quite well.
Yeah. I was gonna say something bad, but again, I think we should wait on that front. I feel like OG and Fred VanVleet were the obvious 2 guys who carried the Raptors through this one. OG had like 18 points in the first half. I think that was a career high.
First quarter at 18.
Sorry, first quarter, and then like none in the second quarter, maybe 2. Yeah. And then Fred, just a good all-around game from him. Hit a couple, like his 3-point. Him and OG made 9 of their 11 threes. So yeah. I guess that's really what I'm saying. Like when you don't have Gary Trent Jr. in the lineup, you need a certain amount of attempts and makes from 3. And I guess in a game like this one, you're really thankful that OG and Fred both had it, because the Wizards really heated up behind the arc, and at a certain point, it's just a math game. But so without OG and Fred hitting those shots, I don't think the Raptors would have won this one.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking about it as I was watching the game on like analysis, and sometimes it really just does come down to like they hit their shots tonight. Like we've seen so many games where they don't, and it's like they play well otherwise, you know. But yeah, I think with OG's shooting, like I mean, he's 4 for 10 from three, was great. But I think what really stands out to me is like he's hitting a greater variety of shots, and I wrote about it on Friday. Like his mid range jumper has been like his percentage is at like 57-58% in the last 10 games. And you can see it, like he's sticking those step backs, he's hitting the wide open ones, and he wasn't hitting those earlier in the year. And when he is just kind of a knockdown shooter, like a dependable pull-up guy, it does really change the dynamic of this team. Like for so long this season, we haven't had OG as a reliable scorer, and you can kind of see like how much he alleviates spacing for this team.
Yeah, for sure. And since he went into that starting lineup, like I've said this on the show, he had to be more aggressive shooting the three because now there's even less shooters in that lineup when Gary goes to the bench. And that's really what I like. All of that mid-range stuff, it kind of catches me off guard, and it's really promising, but it's still small sample size. I have to see OG do some of that stuff over a longer period of time to really buy it. We'll see. It would definitely be nice. But he took 10 threes today, and like that aggressiveness shooting the ball with just an inch of space is what I really like, because he is that good of a shooter, and like he has to know it and behave that way, especially for this team to succeed. Like guys, Scotty, Pascal, OG, they need to be taking 3-point shots, even if it's not their go-to shot. They just don't have the luxury of like stepping into the mid-range every time because there's not enough guards around them who are going to take those shots.
Yeah, and yet, like, not to get into the negative here, but and yet, like, hold on, I'm just scrolling down to
before we get in the negative, because I'm pretty close to getting to go there, I just want to give quick shouts outs. Chris Boucher, I think he's been really good.
yeah, I
like,
was gonna say him as well.
Maybe the first couple months of the season were a bit slow for him, but like most of this season, he's been a real big boon off the bench, and there haven't been like, imagine if he had a down year, how bad this bench would be. They really have gotten some consistency out of him. He's figured out ways to consistently impact a game with his havoc creation. And so I think shouts out to him, shouts out to Jeff Doughton Jr. Do you want to talk about Jeff Doughton Jr. versus Will Barton minutes?
Yeah, I was ready. I actually haven't hated the Barton minutes. Like he's playing point guard, which he doesn't want to be doing clearly, and has made the sacrifice to do it. And I think he's done a fine job of kind of being a linchpin passer. Like I've kind of noted a few times where he hasn't even hesitated with like Will Barton is a scorer. Like he's a Lou Williams type. Like passing is not in his nature, and he's really deferred to that role, which I appreciate. And we don't have a lot of guys on this team other than Doughton who does this. So I actually think like Barton hasn't been terrible, and his shot would eventually come. That being said, I have been on the Doughton train, as have a lot of people for some time now. And I do think it's a shame that we signed Barton right when Doughton was kind of like hitting his stride. And you see that actually for him as a court commander, as like on ball, like handler, like it is natural for him to be a passer. It is natural for him to find the open guy and to defer to them. And that's desperately what this team needs. Not to mention he's a good on-ball defender. He can hit his shot when he's open. So I'm doubting over Barton now.
Yeah. All I'll say to your point about Barton is that he does take some bad shots, even if he defers, and Doughton never does that. Like Doughton will never take a super aggressive,
almost to a negative,
almost to a negative. But I would rather that on this team than
yes
Barton, because there's a lot of mouths to feed, and Barton kind of coming out of the gate just shooting like these contested mid-range jumpers or these step back threes. It's not for me. The defense is so clearly Jeff Doughton so much better.
Yeah, the poke
And
behinds from Barton is just nauseating to watch, although he got one today.
And it's like Nick tried to play 10 guys today, and we're at a point in the season where like I would rather all of those minutes go to Jeff Doughton. Like obviously Barton got the injury, and I hope he's okay, but I've said this on the show enough times. I'm just there. Precious Achua did not play in the second half. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think, and I saw someone tweet this, which I think is good insight. And it's probably true for Precious too. But Chris Boucher seems to be playing better with Koloko, and it makes sense, right? Like Boucher, first of all, Precious can't play the backup center minutes. We've seen how that's gone. Boucher plays kind of like a Time Lord, off-ball, rangy, athletic shot blocker with Koloko in the middle, as is Koloko, frankly. But Boucher, it really gives Boucher a lot more ability to orbit with a guy like Koloko on the back line. So I shout out to Koloko. I think he's given his defense has been a lot better. He's been a lot more disciplined on his rotations. He's not getting caught with I don't know how many fouls he had today.
3.
Fouls.
No, one.
Yeah, it didn't feel like he was fouling much. 1 foul in 15 minutes, which is like must be a record for him. So I think he put in good minutes, and I like that we now have a backup center. Lo and behold, we're a big team. Look at that. So yeah, Koloko gave us good minutes.
I would like, to your point, those Chris Boucher and Precious Achua minutes have been bad all season, but Precious has been good beside Koloko and Pirtle. So I would like Precious to be in the rotation beside one of those guys, because ultimately I just want this guy getting minutes, even if he's not all that helpful. But we're at a point in the season where it doesn't look like Nick really cares about that stuff, and hard to blame him because Precious did not play well before the injury.
Yeah, and then the hamstring's the excuse. I will say just quickly on the Precious thing that I will never understand Nurse's rotations. I like you mentioned the 10 guys today. Like it was just like it looked like he closed his eyes and just randomly pointed at the bench on like who's coming in and where. Like I've tried to find rhyme and reason, and it's quite hard because you find it for 2 games and then it completely switches. But I do think there's a way to incorporate all 3, Koloko, Precious, and Boucher and Doughton in a meaningful way if Nurse really wanted to. So I obviously he's not in Nurse's best books right now, but I think you can accomplish both, and he's choosing not to right now. But it could just be that his hamstring, he's just easing back.
It's interesting because he did play really badly prior to all the benching, but the Bucks game, which was his last game, I thought he was really good. So then to see him only get 6 minutes after that, and it's not like he had any noticeable errors in those 6 minutes. He was fine. It's a little surprising that he doesn't. Sorry, it wasn't 6. He got some garbage time minutes, so I think he played 4 minutes in the first half, and then I was surprised he didn't get back in the rotation. Like ultimately, if you want to reach your upside as a playoff team, you want Precious playing well. He is a really good defender. Say what you will, and he feeds into their size and stuff. So you want to get his confidence high, and I don't think 6 minutes is doing that. But we'll have to see how it plays out. Because you're right, the hamstring injury will probably be Nick Nurse's excuse when he gets asked about it in post game today. Scotty also looked rough coming off an injury. But yeah, those guys should get better. In terms of that third quarter stuff, like I'll start here because I was watching. Did you watch the Pistons game by chance? The Raptors Pistons game. Yeah. So when I was watching that game, I was saying to like the people I was sitting with, like, it'd be nice if the Raptors didn't play like a team that's just trying to get their individual numbers, because as soon as that game was like up by 10, which was pretty early in the second quarter, they just started kind of playing individual ball. One guy takes a turn shooting a step back 3, Siakam goes, and like I felt like it was very like selfish basketball, and they got away with it because that Pistons team was like a tank team, like the definition of it. But I said, like, It'd be nice if the Raptors built some good habits in these types of games and kept moving the ball and kept defending and kept, not just playing this I'm going for my numbers type of game. And I felt like it kind of came back to bite them in that third quarter where they got off to a big lead. They were confident coming out of the break. And then it's a lot of just my turn, your turn. We're not moving the ball. We're not making the extra pass. And then on defense, we are just not challenging 3-pointers. So I don't like that's I guess what's wrong with this team is that like they're not doing those little things to build up habits. They still are too hot and too cold. And even in a win like this, there are some major red flags, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like we beat a team that was missing its two best players, arguably, and Detroit is whatever. And then Indiana didn't have their best player and we lost them. So like there's not a lot to build on here. That being said, I still am confident in this team because I feel like very slowly they're building something that looks actual like foundational, like I was saying earlier. It's just not there yet. And part of it, like it's hard to know what the cause is. It looks like, based on the reporting and stuff, that they don't like playing with each other. That's like one theory. The other one is that, at least from my like perspective, it's like, yeah, we know we're a playoff team, and it's just like we're just waiting to turn it on until we get to the playoffs, which is a horrible mentality to have. It's like they haven't earned that right. It's kind of like, yeah, I was listening to Zach Lowe. They talk about that with the Warriors. It's like they're just waiting to flick the switch, or the Celtics. Maybe they're talking about that. They're waiting to flick, and you kind of get the same vibes with this Raptors team. Not deservedly so, again, but
Yeah.
it's very concerning, and I'm conflicted because on the one hand, when they're locked in and there is the ball movement and there is the team play and the shooting is going, they look freaking awesome. And you spend 2 weeks watching March Madness, and like you watch all of the system play, and then you come to the Raptors, and it's just like it's even more glaring. And before it was glaring. So
Yeah, but the skill is amplified at the same time.
100%. There's no question. Although the skill is getting better in college, I have to
Yeah.
say. Like I haven't finished the Texas Miami game, but man, that was a good game.
That's a tough loss for my guy Marcus Carr. I was rooting for him.
Anyway, you're right. Like the third quarter is just a horrible like thing to see. You want the killer instinct like the Milwaukee Bucks, where you just want to snuff them out immediately. But
yeah, it's like an immaturity thing.
Yeah. But I guess also the silver lining is like we were seeing so much of that over the course of the year when it just felt like this season was like a disaster, which it kind of has been, and they got out of it. And so you could call that progress, I guess.
That's true. Like instead of it being 1 game on, 1 game off, now it's more like 2 games on, 1 game off. Like the Pacers game was pretty ugly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fine. Okay, you want to talk about this? I don't know how many thoughts I'm going to give, to be honest, because
I don't know.
The report is that Ime Udoka could draw interest from the Raptors or Rockets this summer. The reason I'm not going to speculate too heavy is because I've never heard of Steve B. Hoop, and I have a rule in life that I only listen to things that Woj or Shams tweets. Like my friend texted me. He's like, "Did you hear about the Andrew Wiggins rumors? Do you know about these?
No.
The reason why he's away." Okay, I'll tell you after. But he texted me this like crazy rumor, and then I'm like, until Woj or Shams tweets it, I'm just gonna ignore what you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what thoughts do you have on this email?
I don't know. We didn't even need to talk about it. I just thought it was kind of interesting. I mean, the implication would be, I think for him to be reintegrated into NBA society, he's probably going to have to be an assistant coach. I can't imagine him being a head coach, especially after Brooklyn tried to do it and then just got flamed for it. So,
I think you're underrating the NBA's moral compass.
I definitely am not underrating their moral compass. I'm just saying that like the PR fiasco that occurred should be indication that they won't try this again. I could be wrong.
I disagree. But okay.
Anyway, well, so then the implication could be that Nurse is not going to be there in the summer, or the implication is that Nurse needs to beef up their assistant coaches.
Right. I read it as a head coach because the Raptors and Rockets being picked as these two teams are the two teams that have had the most noise in terms of a coaching change being needed from the outside, obviously, like from fans and analysts and stuff like
Right.
that. So I read it as a head coaching thing, and I also don't think Ime would take an assistant coaching job. Um, I think if it's not this year, then he'll wait another year for the noise to die down and he'll get a head coaching job. But I honestly think it could happen as soon as this summer. Like, you're right that Brooklyn got some pushback, but that was within the same season. I think you let a summer go by, the noise, the heat comes off. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. Like, I want to be very
Yeah.
clear about that. He
Yeah.
did something wrong in that organization. But the NBA is not like some sort of like league that's gonna reward the nicest people, and like
No,
he's
of
clearly a
course.
good coach. A team is gonna give him a chance. Like, people have done much worse and gotten a second chance in the NBA. So
Yeah, but the only counter, I totally agree with you, all of that. The only counter is we did just see Isaiah Thomas get hired as a consultant with the Suns, and then within like 35 minutes, the Suns backtracking and being like, "Oh yeah, right, he's an abuser, asshole." Like, actually, never mind, we're not hiring him. So, if the kerfuffle is big enough, anyway, it's all
yeah, and I
conjecture.
think the Raptors are an interesting like example because as far as NBA teams go, they are pretty good. Like, they're by no means perfect, but like you see a guy like Terrence Davis get charged with sexual or domestic abuse, and they ship him out that trade deadline,
Yeah.
right? Like, they're not perfect because they got an asset for Terrence Davis, but a lot of teams would have just held on to him and ignored it and wait for the noise to die down. I think the Raptors are better than a lot of organizations, but
Did
they
we
also aren't perfect.
Did we ever get I don't want to go down this too. Did we get any confirmation on what the Adrian Griffin stuff was all about?
No, I don't know about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of an interesting one that faded away. Anyway, back
That's
to
true.
the
Yeah.
Wizards game, the third quarter. I did want to say with the OG thing is that in the third quarter he had a grand total of 2 shots,
Yeah, you're
um,
right. I
and
wanted to bring that up too.
he had 8 in the half. He had what did he? Yeah, he had 6 in the fourth quarter. So they kind of went back to him. Like, surprise, surprise, when the game was tight, they
Yeah.
had to get back to what was working for them. But I think it's evidence to what we're talking about. Like, the hot hand, guys going for his
Mhm.
career high, and they go completely away from him. It's just inexcusable. It's inexcusable as teammates, especially for guys like Freddie and Pascal who get theirs every goddamn night, and
Mhm.
they can't feed the one hot hand for like more than a quarter. I find that very frustrating and concerning when OG's already expressed being disgruntled.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. It's like that is how you back up the point about guys wanting to get their numbers, is that these guys are not used to not taking shots and letting. I think OG took 10 shots in the first quarter, and they're not used to that, and instead of letting the game kind of flow the way it should have, um he didn't get his first shot until like 2 minutes left in the second quarter. So they did a terrible job of that. Again, some of it is not having a ton of like pure point guards on the floor to manage a
Yes,
game,
exactly.
but also some of it is a selfishness and a need to get your own shot. And like, it's not hard to get OG the ball in the post or to get him, like a look.
Running a,
Yeah, or to actually run a play for him as the
yeah,
point guard and say like, look, we're gonna run something to get OG a look. It's
and
not hard, but it takes like a selfless mentality, and
and
that is what is not always there.
And I wrote about on Friday like how Freddie has been playing the best basketball of his career, in my opinion, in the last couple months. And
Mhm.
distribution is a huge part of that. Like, his assist percentage is way up, his assists per game is way up. And you can see
10
it.
per
Like,
game almost since like
pardon
the
me?
trade deadline. Almost 10 assists per game since the trade
Yeah.
deadline.
And before Pirtle, it was like 6.5 or something. So it's really jumped. And you can see it too, right? Like, he's being much more. I mean, a lot of it is coming off the pick and roll with Pirtle, but he's being much more conscientious of finding the open guy, creating a disadvantage, and then exploiting it, as opposed to him, shooting that pull up shot, which is a fine shot, but is not necessarily hitting it. So he went away from that a little bit today. I don't know what his assists were. Do you offhand?
He had 7 assists today.
So
Barnes had 6.
That's lower for him, and I think, like to your point, he's not a true point guard. He's never going to be a true point guard. He's never going to be Kyle Lowry. But the closer he gets to a Kyle Lowry, I think the better off this team is.
For sure. Or Scotty is maybe going to turn into that type of player because he's more of a pass first guy. He has some of those instincts too, but he has to develop that handle tighter if he wants to have the ball in his hands like Fred does.
It's actually,
anyways.
No, one last thing.
Yeah.
It was actually why I like the rotation of, it was Barnes, OG, Doughton, and I want to say
Koloko and Boucher.
And
the guys who started that fourth quarter and went on.
I really like that lineup because, to your point, like Barnes can't be the full-time point guard just by virtue of his like lack of ball handling skills. So you have Doughton who can kind of do that, and they can share the responsibilities. And Flynn and Barnes had this a little bit over the course of the year. The problem being that neither Barnes or Doughton are really knockdown 3-point shooters. But I liked that lineup also because it made OG a primary scorer, him and Scotty. And like, I don't think it's going to succeed in hyper competitive scenarios, but generally speaking, I did like the dynamic that it created.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on to the tax man?
Lay it on me, man.
I mean, I think it's OG Anunoby. Pulled up some film here. But yeah, we talked about him. 10 3-point attempts, super aggressive from the 3-point line, made a lot of them. Had that mid-range game going. Ooh, right here is a little fadeaway mid-range.
3 blocks.
3 blocks, damn. If you have him on your fantasy team, you're happy. And yeah, they should have found him a little bit more, but especially with Gary out, they really needed the shooting from him and Fred, and those two guys delivered, and those guys, but especially OG, because he really set the tone. Can-Am Taxman of the game. Go to canamtax.com or call the number at the top of your screen and get your taxes done, because I'm pretty sure you're late, and they'll get the money back that you deserve. All right. Any last thoughts, Aiden, before we get out of here and I go eat my dinner at 9 o'clock?
I love a good late dinner. I feel like I'm Spanish or something. Standings implications. So they are now a half game ahead of Chicago, 9th. Atlanta is a half game ahead of them at 8th. Atlanta owns the tiebreaker. Brooklyn's back into the 6th spot. Is that right?
Looks like it on my standings here. Yeah.
Wizards and Pacers are tied for 11th. So the Pacers are technically 11th.
Did the Hawks win is the question.
I think they lost.
They did lose.
Lost to Memphis.
They did lose to Memphis, and I needed blocks today. I was telling you earlier in fantasy. Jaren Jackson Jr., 5 blocks. Might have saved my season.
Are these standings updated? Do we know that? Can we confirm?
No, I can't confirm anything.
Okay.
Anyway. No, they're not. We're 37 and 38 now. So
yeah, that's what it says.
Not on mine.
Whoa.
Mine say 36 and 38. So yeah, I think the Raptors are now tied with the Hawks in record. Yeah.
We just reported complete inaccurate data, but hey, we'll find out in a couple hours.
We'll be back on Tuesday after the Miami Heat game to report some more inaccurate data about the Toronto Raptors. Thanks for joining us. If you're listening to the podcast, thanks for listening. Always subscribe to the YouTube channel, Raptors Republic, and follow us on Twitter, because we generally tweet the link out from the Raptors Republic account when we go live. And yeah, we'll be back Tuesday. Have a good night.
Peace.